Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second in a series of virtual presentations sponsored by the Helping Those Who Help Others Steering Committee. My name is Gary Lloyd Lester. I'm the Director of Community and Coalition Initiatives for the Suicide Prevention Center of New York State. We're excited to have a presentation this morning on a new program called Wingman Connect. This is going to be a co-presentation by Dr. Peter Wyman and Mr. Bryan Yates. Dr. Wyman is a professor and academic chief of the Division of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry program at University of Rochester. Dr. Wyman develops and tests network health interventions that leverage natural change agents to strengthen adaptive coping and social bonds across a network. His work has been funded by the National Institutes for Health, Centers for Disease Control, and Department of Defense for Suicide and Substance Use Prevention, and New York State for Prevention Dissemination. Mr. Bryan Yates has served as Senior Project Coordinator since 2015 for Wingman Connect, leading project logistics at Shepherd Air Force Base in liaison with Air Force Headquarters, Integrated Resilience Directorate. He is a Wingman Connect trainer and has led development of adapting Wingman Connect to remote online delivery. Mr. Yates served 6 years as an active duty Army combat medic and was deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, and 9 years in the Army Reserves. We would encourage folks to make sure that you use the question function throughout. If you have any questions, we'll be monitoring those and sharing those with Dr. Wyman and Mr. Yates. And with that, I'm going to turn things over.
Good morning. I'm going to assume everybody can hear me. Okay. Great, thumbs up. So we appreciate this invitation. We feel like our Office of Mental Health colleagues are among our closest ones we've really worked with for over a decade now, and we're really glad to be here today with you. So I'm going to start by asking you to do a brief exercise with me, if you would. And I'd like you to take a minute and bring to mind the people to whom you feel closest, who give you a feeling of belonging, connection, support. Okay? So hopefully you have some people there that you could bring to mind and think about. For me, so here's me. I think about my wife, who my kind of chief quarantine partner here for a long time, and then I think of our a trip to San Francisco we took a year ago with our daughter, which was carefree. When I think of San Francisco, I think of my colleague Tony Pisani, worked closely with for a long time, and also some friends that I enjoy talking to from that live in Boston. I also think about my son and daughter-in-law and my granddaughter, who puts a smile on my face all the time. And if you're anything like me, this exercise shows that how our minds construct our kind of subjective sense of connection and our network. Our mind, our brain tends to do that by association. So one thought leads to another. There are emotions that are tied with that. And this kind of person-centered approach has really been the dominant one in mental health research. So a lot of measures of perceived social support, belonging, connectedness that have really relied primarily on this kind of person-centered perspective. But it's not the only one. We are also part of much broader social networks that are much bigger, that are have structural dimensions that are large, that are far-reaching. Bryan, maybe you could bring up that next slide. And so this perspective, there we go. that the structural networks that we're a part of. Here's a leader in the field that said that one of the most potent ideas in the social sciences is the notion that individuals are embedded in thick webs of social relations and interactions. And this approach really focuses on the structure of these broad networks that we're all a part of. The next slide here it shows an example of what does that mean really, these networks. And this is an example of a friendship network, and a typical way that those are constructed is by asking people to kind of name who are they closest to. So one type of network is a friendship network, and in this case each of these nodes, males are squares, females are circles. So those are all individuals, and those lines connecting them are the friends that they nominate. Those can be single directional, one person naming another, or they can be bidirectional if they both name each other. And this kind of approach points to thinking about what are the positions that people occupy. So some people are really central. They tend to have a lot of influence because they're popular. They have many people identifying them. Some people form bridges between different parts of the network. They tend to share and kind of spread information across a network. Some people are on the periphery, and some people are relatively more isolated in their network. And this kind of network approach also, in addition to individuals, it can also get us thinking about what is the overall structure of a network. So you might wonder, what is this? Why did this network kind of come together in this unusual way? Well, this is actually a 5th grade classroom, and a colleague of ours, Tom Valente, who does a lot of this work in prevention, created this from a 5th grade class. And in that age group, gender is often kids select friends based on gender. And so that's why this network is structured in this way. So the next slide, our team has worked for about 10 years on creating preventive interventions that leverage social networks. So we're really interested in thinking about how can we take advantage and the networks that individuals are embedded within for prevention. And we've done this in 2 primary ways. They're not exclusive, but there are 2 different ways for interventions. One is by what we call network diffusion, and that's really capitalizing on the tendency for things to be transmitted through networks based on using that are often spread by people who are influential, kind of the key opinion leaders, early adopters, that type person that sort of spreads things through a network. And let's see if you just advance one more here. So in this kind of approach, we're interested in thinking about who are those influential key opinion leaders in different parts of a network. And those are the red, kind of circled in red. And then how do we train and prepare them? And then how do we give them skills to spread a model of health through their network? So this is what Sources of Strength. This is a suicide prevention program for secondary schools that we've been working on for about a decade and partnered with the Office of Mental Health to disseminate. And this is training these key opinion leaders and for diffusion, giving them a model of healthy coping, growing natural coping resources. And then, but a second way here that's shown on this slide is building cohesive, healthy networks. So in this type of intervention, we're training everyone, not just key opinion leaders, and we're leveraging the protective factors that are really embedded in the group. How do we build strong bonds, cohesion, healthier norms for coping and help seeking? And so we were funded in 2015 by the Department of Defense to develop a program for early career airmen, a group at high risk of suicide. We use this network approach of building cohesive, healthy networks. And this shows actually 4 groups of early career airmen in their classes. They're learning their job in these technical training classes, these small groups of about 8 to 12. And so we're training all of them together as a group. And actually these 4 classes trained together. So I think the next slide, Bryan's going to take over for a minute and give you a little bit of background on why this group of airmen, why did we take this approach?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me all right. Like Peter said, so this is this graph of military suicides. As you can see, the military suicide rate has been steadily increasing for over a decade, with emerging adults, service members 24 years of age or younger being at the highest risk. Historically, the Air Force has seen lower rates than other branches, but several years ago, that gap began to close significantly. So since 2008, suicide rate for all branches of service has increased 61%, whereas during that same period, it's increased about 107% for the U.S. Air Force. So the Defense Services Suicide Prevention Office has identified those young enlisted service members as the population of greatest concern across all branches. And it specifically identified the need to promote connection as a core outcome of new suicide prevention initiatives. So seeing this trend in 2014, the U.S. Air Force requested that an upstream primary prevention program be developed specifically for their first-term airmen as they enter service, and began collaboration with Dr. Wyman and our team to develop the Wingman Connect using this network approach to strengthen those protective factors. So Wingman Connect, like I said, was specifically designed for first-term airmen, these airmen in training in the technical training phase. So technical training is the phase of their initial entry training that immediately follows basic training, where they learn those fundamental career skills and job proficiencies. But it's also where they form their foundational perceptions of Air Force culture as well as life in the military. So the airmen spend 12 to 15 hours a day together with their classmates in these small 8 to 12 person groups. So it's also the first opportunity that the airmen have to really form close bonds with other people within their career fields, and the instructors that have come back to train there as well. So Wingman Connect focuses on this tech class unit, and it was really developed to target those norms within that class and the connections that natural organizational element bonds. So the training is a mixture of high energy games, both individual and skill building exercises, and they really focus on drawing out examples from the participants, in the real world about these strengths in their lives. So I'd like to show just a real quick video. One of the initial points that we make with these airmen is to get them sharing. And one of the first questions that we ask is for them to tell us a little bit about, what it was that they, some of the reasons that they had for enlisting. So this is a video of an online training that we've done in the last month or two. So this is at the very beginning of the day one training, where the airmen are just sharing a little bit about why they chose to enlist in the Air Force.
I'll go first. I kind of have a military family too. I kind of always wanted to join. I always planned on joining. At first, I enlisted in the Air National Guard as a TAC P because I thought the job sounded cool. But more or less it's for just wanting to, and there's no way my mom could have paid for college, so that's a big part of it as well.
So one of the things that we found in these trainings, even though these airmen spend a lot of time together, we give an opportunity for them to talk about a lot of things that they don't normally share with their classmates. One of which is why they chose to enlist and what some of their goals that brought them there were. So I also mentioned these high energy activities, that capitalize on real world strengths. One of the aspects of that is between the second and third day. We issue a challenge to all the classes in the training to go out together as a class and do something to build and work on one of their cores together. So here's a couple of examples of just things that airmen have done. They've left base to go have a meal together, which they might not normally do all as one group. The screenshot on the left is a class that chose to all purchase patriotic apparel. And then Shepherd Air Force Base has bicycles that they can, and due to the COVID, they can't leave post. So they actually went as a class and went for a bike ride around the post, and they got a lot of attention that way, and they had a really good time. So, you know, by combining these class activities as well as within the training, there are the individual skills, you know, self-assessment of the cores, and thinking about that. So, speaking of the 4 cores themselves, this is the primary teaching tool that's used throughout the training. So, the training modules are surrounding these constructs of kinship. You know, for that, we would ask the airmen to share about friends and family that have given them support since enlisting, or airmen at Shepherd Air Force Base that help them throughout tech school. So it's really about drawing out those examples of the connections that really provide us a sense of belonging. The Purpose Core, we discuss individual goals of the airmen, career and life goals, as well as the values that kind of guide us and give us direction, the roles and the commitments that bring us a sense of being valued and contributing to something bigger than ourselves. Guidance Core is centered around identifying, building, and maintaining connections with people that can provide us wisdom, perspective, and mentoring. And then lastly, Balance Core is focused on healthy activities, hobbies, and interests, you know, how those things can provide us counterbalance to the stressors of the day-to-day life, and how to keep all of our cores in balance and check and build strength throughout each of these areas and develop some diversity. So towards the end of the training, we actually ask the airmen and we invite them to participate in creating a video where they share about one of the cores that they feel that they are strong in currently at Shepherd Air Force Base and what they are doing right then day to day to keep that core strong. And then we create a legacy video from this that we then send back out to the training group as a whole several weeks later. So we send that out via text message as part of the text message campaign, where we do offer, as well as some of the other feedback from the training gets sent back out to these airmen. And we have an example of one of those short videos that gets sent out to the airmen right now.
Guys are talking to me right now because I'm surrounded by people that are awesome. That show me something new every day. Guidance is strong for me right now because I have a lot of new mentors and people to pick up. Balance is strong for me right now because even though I'm focusing on school, I'm still going to gym and stay connected to all my family and friends. Balance is strong for me right now because I know how to balance out home life and school and kind of keep everything all together.
Friendship is strong for me right now because I'm always hanging out with people and strengthening all my relationships.
It's strong for me right now because without everyone here right now, I wouldn't be who I am, right? With my buddy right here, Ganson. Purpose is strong for me right now because I am always coming to work every day with my wife in my mind, thinking about the things I gotta do to make sure that me and her have the best life in the future that we can possibly have.
Purpose is strong for me right now because I know I'm doing what I'm trying to do.
I'm Airman First Class Valero. I was in 365 and I was avionics for F-15, and now I'm over at Seymour Johnson working ELO, which is a active deployable unit, and I'm working on the E-model. My purpose is growing because I'm connecting with the community, connecting more with my family back home, connecting more with my friends, and connecting more with my coworkers, and it's just making me feel like I'm a better person, and all that energy, that positive energy that's in me, I just want to give it back to you.
So the last section of that video was, as he said, an airman who had left Shepherd Air Force Base and moved on to his first operational assignment. We would make contact with some of the airmen from the training at that later point and get a check-in with them on their cores, and then we would show that video back to subsequent cohorts of airmen who were going through the program and the training, as you know, something to look ahead to, and then also linked some of the familiar faces that they may not have known, but you know, that had gone through their training programs before them, back to the classes that were current. So, you know, the training altogether was, you know, took a long time. It was developed over 17 months, and once we had this well-tailored program, then the real work began to test it. So this consort diagram shows the flow of participants through the clustered randomized control trial. So we had support to train in 2 of the training squadrons, 365th Avionics maintainers and 363rd Weapons and Armament maintainers. And between October 2017 and January 2019, we had just over 1,000 classes pass through these squadrons in 55 different occupations. So the classes meeting the inclusion criteria were matched and based on occupation size, duration, start date. And then the best match pairs were recruited and brought to a training. So over 26 cohorts, we had 1,485 airmen enroll and participate in the study. The technical training classes, they were randomized by class, and then after enrollment and baseline surveys were complete, we would actually split a large group of 8 to 10 classes into 2 training conditions, and one would receive Wingman Connect training and the other would receive stress management training, which served as our active control condition. So you can see the follow-up rates across both of the training conditions were very high. We were very pleased to see this many airmen completing the surveys, as well as not being lost to follow-up. Our targets were exceeded by these numbers. At the 1-month follow-up, over 90%, and at 6-month follow-up, after everyone had left Shepherd Air Force Base and gone to the next base assignment, we had a near 85% completion rate on that follow-up. So very high data capture, and overall the study ended up being very, very balanced.
Thanks,
So
Bryan.
I'll turn it back over to Peter to talk about some of the results.
Yeah. So what have we learned so far from this model of training groups together and really capitalizing on those close connections, building those class protective factors? So this graph shows that Wingman Connect decreased a measure of suicide ideation. That's the left. The blue line is the Wingman Connect group. That line going down between the start of their entry and then 1 month later while they were still in training, and then the follow-up 6 months later. Depression also down and actually continued to go down. So it significantly reduced suicide ideation and depression at 1 month. The gains, the decrease, the difference in the average score was not significant at 6 months on the suicide ideation. As you see, probably 0.06, but the trend was maintained in that group. So these were our primary outcomes. And then the next slide shows we also looked at on the measure of depression. There's an elevated score, a clinically significant score with a high probability of depression diagnosis. And the group that was trained in Wingman Connect, airmen in classes that were Wingman Connect trained, were about 20% less likely to have elevated depression at either the 1 or the 6 month follow-up. And so based on the rates of elevated depression, if we trained about 21 airmen in Wingman Connect, we would produce about 1 fewer airmen at elevated depression versus the control training, which was a more traditional kind of just a standard kind of stress management training, more cognitive and more individual focused. Next slide shows that actually this surprised us, the extent of this effect. The Women Connect group also had fewer problems in their training classes. And they were about 50% less likely to receive a corrective training, to say they had gotten a corrective training for performance problems, or a negative counseling statement in their records. So you can see that in the blue line side by side. The base BL is the baseline at the beginning, and then at the 1 month follow-up. So overall they were less likely, and then about half as likely on those 2 indicators. The gains in reducing occupational problems did not extend into 6 months later after they had transferred to their first base. So the effects were there during training, but not afterward. Did not follow up, although depression was significant at 6 months, the decrease in the Women Connect Train group. So this shows we wanted to in addition, to test the theoretical model here, which is, were the decreases in suicide ideation and depression, were they linked to or attributable to gains that classes made in being closer? So there were a bunch of measures that we gave them about their classes. Cohesion, do you support each other? Do you work well together? Do you have connections that you value? How is your morale? Do members of your class support healthy behaviors and healthy norms, such as working on your purpose, healthy coping? And we found that it did. That this is what's called a mediation. So we looked at the direct path to reduce suicide risk at 1 month, and then we looked at this combining this indicator of healthy cohesive classes, and we found that was a mediator, that the training increased healthy cohesive classes, which helped to reduce suicide risk. And it also, for depression, the results were virtually identical for depression at decreases at 1 month. So it really suggests that their perceptions that they were part of a class that was healthier, more connected, that they felt more connected to their class, were a significant factor in helping to reduce suicide ideation and depression during that technical training experience. So next slide, we're going to wrap up here. And first want to acknowledge all our colleagues. This is very much a group effort, and we're very grateful for all our talented colleagues, both at the University of Rochester and in other places that have worked with us on this, and our funding from the Department of Defense. So yeah. So the next slide kind of wrap things up, and we'll be interested in your thoughts and maybe some discussion about other ways this program may be used. So one thing, the Women Connect benefits, we did not. They were essentially, so this is a universal training. Everyone is eligible, invited, not just those at high risk, and that is different than a lot of what suicide prevention is doing, which is either training in risk factor, how do you refer people at risk, how do you identify, refer, connect them to help, or how do we do interventions for those who are already identified. And this was a skill building for the group as a whole, and the benefits were spread and distributed across that group, not just those that were at high risk at the beginning. And I think that's important because it indicates, risk is fluctuating. It is, new people face new hard times. Things go wrong, or they struggle, so the benefits were distributed across that. And this may be particularly important in work settings where many individuals will not seek help. So to be able to prepare and train a population so that they're less likely to become vulnerable to depression and suicide ideation. It shows one advantage of a universal approach, although we certainly need to continue our work for high-risk populations and treatments as well. These are really complementary. For the Air Force, the dual benefits on reducing occupational problems and reducing mental health risk factors is critical. In an environment where the pressures of the work of producing products of airmen, getting airmen fit and ready to man their jobs all over the world is really critical. And programs that can support operational and suicide prevention needs are far more likely to be sustainable. Our team has really become, I don't know how to say it, kind of convinced that training natural organizational units as a group may be a critical way forward for this kind of training. This training was distributed about 2 hours a day over 3 consecutive days. So there was really a kind of a way to deep dive. That was also selected because it wasn't as disruptive. It wasn't disruptive at all with their training. It was done at the end of their day. But it may be really critical for making this a group activity that people feel a part of, that it's not a box you have to check off because you're required to, but we ask them, like, why are you here? Like, what's important to you in the Air Force? But then they also work on those skills together as a group. Like, what's important in your class, in your work unit? Like, what do you want to strengthen together as a group? And that may be critical in making these kinds of trainings ecologically valid and people interested in being there, but also make the training part of that group culture so they can take it and influence each other in a day-to-day way, which may be critical for having some lasting benefit. Trainings often don't have a lot of lasting benefit, because the environment doesn't support that training being a part of the group culture. So our team has been starting to have some discussion and really interested in thinking what other workforce groups might this approach be beneficial for? How could we adapt this? Adult work groups are really been in many ways a missing link for a lot of suicide prevention. We know it's the greatest mortality rate is really across adulthood. And it's, other than, doing a lot in primary care or healthcare settings, it's tough to engage adults in universal prevention. And so work groups might be an important way to reach and form, get access and really meet needs. So, you all, I know, have been thinking about this, and we'd certainly be interested in some thoughts that you have. It looks like somebody had a question about showing the last slide again. So maybe that's the one. I'm not sure which one that is. Maybe you could put in which slide you're interested in, Tony. Okay. Well, we can certainly we can also make these slides available. So, we're going to stop here and leave some time, questions, comments, discussion, and we'd certainly welcome hearing from you.
Thank you, Peter and Bryan. We'll keep an eye on the Q&A function. In terms of other workforces, has anyone expressed interest in bringing this to other occupations, or have you begun to do any work in that space?
Prior to March, we were starting to have some discussion with some different workforce groups, police, fire, unions, veterans is a group that we actually are starting to have quite a bit of potential, really thinking about, and some groups of interest there. So yeah, we have we have not taken yet any, I'd say really any tangible steps. That with the kind of start on that was a bit disrupted in March, but that's kind of where it stands right now.
Sure. There's a question about train the trainer model for instructors and facilitators. Have you gone to that level yet?
Well, so the Air Force is very interested in continuing this. We are continuing this in the training environment, and Bryan has been leading. We actually had created an adaptation of this that you saw a little bit of that can be delivered online. And our next phase with them is how do we bridge this training environment with the operational Air Force bases? So because that, we don't see this as a, single training that's going to be a lifetime inoculation. This is going to, this has really got to develop skills that are going to be continually reinforced and norms. So we are going to be working on that next phase to expand the trainer base and prepare trainers that are affiliated with the Air Force to be able to lead this. In a workforce environment, we would certainly have to make adaptations. I think it could be done, but what are the motivators? What's the culture of the various work group that we're working with, and then certainly thinking about how to develop a trainer for this, for delivering that. So it would have to certainly be a part of it. We have expanded our own training force, and which I guess is a kind of train the trainer model, which is a lot of shadowing, observing the training. Kind of over time, getting real practice. This is, I would say, this is not a kind of training that you can learn in maybe a single day workshop. It is, there's some facilitation skills that will require, kind of a graduated approach and a bit of a, I think to really do this well, it's an interactive kind of dynamic training that definitely takes some preparation.
That makes sense.
Bryan, I don't know if you want any thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what we do have is a model, a working model from our other programs that we utilize, like Peter said, where it's a kind of a tiered approach to developing trainers. I think there's the conceptual curriculum, and the delivery of that to new trainers is something we're more along the way. I think, part of the challenge, for us is to tailor to specific, like Peter said, the specific needs and the motivators, like within a population, which will be one of the advantages in the next steps that we take with the Air Force, which, we'll be bringing people from within the organization who are knowledgeable, and share those facets. So.
Were there any identifiable barriers or obstacles as you began to roll this out, or anything that sort of lessons learned in terms of implementing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of that, the long development, was to develop the training aspects. But in the early stages of that, I think it was really important for us to, diminish the ask of the the units and the administrators, really make it easy for them to implement and accommodate the training and the study. To find ways. I think it's very common in the military, as I'm sure is elsewhere, when programs like this get rolled out, they get added onto, and in a way create their own burden by taxing the time of the service members. So, we were very careful to not overstep that ask with the airmen. And like Peter said, we delivered the training in 3 2-hour blocks. So that was time that was split. It was, about 45 minutes of instruction time at the end of the day, that in their system was, kind of the excess time. And then about, an hour to an hour and 15 minutes of what is typically, formation time before they head to dinner chow. So didn't take away from the personal time of the airmen, and it didn't take away from the instruction time of the instructors. And I think, following and finding a similar implementation is going to be essential, wherever this goes, so that it does not complicate or challenge, the primary mission of those agencies and organizations. In this case, was producing qualified and trained airmen maintainers. But every institution is going to have its set of mission essential tasks.
Mm-hmm. Not seeing any other questions.
I guess. Oh, go ahead, Gar.
Well, no, I'm not seeing any other immediate questions. So.
Yeah, I was just going to add on implementation. I think to really, have this type of training work does require a substantial amount of real collaboration with the kind of setting and the organizational structure. When you're bringing in these natural parts of a workforce, that really does require substantial buy-in. What's the logical point to do that, and really a commitment of a organization. And fortunately, the Air Force was a partner of us in this, and they, this was addressing a need they had identified. But I think if this was to be extended, it would certainly require that.
No, that absolutely makes sense. There's a question around, did you identify opinion leaders in the units similar to sources of strength, and were they leveraged to strengthen group cohesion?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Bryan, I don't know. You want to talk about that? Bryan, I think you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry. We did identify those individuals as part of the baseline surveys. We offered or asked airmen to nominate other airmen in their class whom they respect and would choose to spend time with. And we identified them as key wingmen. People who, especially in the military environment, they in a lot of ways they're the people that the other classmates are learning from, even if they're not in a position of leadership. They're really who the airmen are looking to when they're not sure, how to respond or how to handle a situation. So those we did not have a formal role for those key wingmen. We did invite them to have lunch with us, with the trainers, and give them a little bit more, a kind of a second pass on the social network theory and some of that network science piece. And the one aspect where we did kind of leverage their position is just by simply having that conversation with them over lunch before the second day training, that they would kind of be the champions for the class challenge activity that I mentioned, where at the end of the second day's training, we have about 15 minutes where classes, break out into groups and actually brainstorm their ideas to go out and work on strengthening a core in the next 24 hours before the third day's training. So having that understanding that they are people that are looked to for kind of those small pieces of guidance of how to respond to a situation. We did leverage their network position in that class as champions for that activity.
You just called this number 677-923-01.
I did not catch that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
There was a question that came in as to any thoughts as to how the model can be adapted for transitioning service members, especially those who might be facing isolation.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you mean transitioning out out of active duty, but that is a group we, when we talk to veterans organizations or systems that serve veterans, that's an area that we're really thinking about getting involved with, which is how to kind of present this model of what are these protective resources that you need? How do you rebuild these? How do you keep these strong in this major transition out of active duty, where you've really probably had a lot of these that are really embedded within your relationships with your fellow, soldiers or airmen or Marines, and so that's really something, that I think could be impactful. But it would definitely take, I think part of the challenge here is what, people tend to be, and this is probably one of the vulnerabilities, they tend to be brought out, as individuals, kind of spit out, and without a new group for affiliation. So what is that natural organizational group that's going to kind of work together on these? So there definitely would have to be some reimagining and thinking about how this might work.
Yeah.
I see a question here, how this model might be applied to police and first responders. Well, I think one question would be, we did this with airmen. Bryan could speak even more about this, but these are airmen that are right out of basic training, and they are learning their job in the Air Force for the groups we worked with from about 2 to 5 months long. It's kind of their training process. And so they're at a very, in a way, there's a lot of receptivity to what is the culture of the Air Force. They're a homogeneous group. And that's an influence, I think that's actually an optimal transition point to really make a difference on culture. So I think ideally, if we were going to train police or fire, it would be in a training academy where really they're like sponges. As we think about now transitioning up in the Air Force to the operational bases, this is going to take some, real rethinking. Like, how do we, where people are working in work units where there's brand new guy, men and women, and then there's real veteran, been there a long time, different rank, different experience, how to train them together or give them this, so that, that's going to take some new thought. And I think training more diverse age and experience groups will take some additional, adaptation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to like a caveat to that, like Peter said, these airmen are, they range from, some of them were retrained, but the longest may have been in service for a year. Majority of them have been, in the Air Force for 3 or 4 months, and I think that is. The setting of doing it within the schoolhouse has its advantages, like they're primed to be learning new things, but also catching these airmen early on the way in. We leverage that that career success, that longitudinal eyes on the horizon, and these airmen at that point are all kind of learning new things, but at different rates, and they can really gain the advantages of isolated success in one airman, in identifying someone on base who has been helpful, in a financial situation or other things. So like it really provides an opportunity for them to learn from each other at a point where they're kind of all learning at a compound rate. I think considering first responder and police settings, like there is that opportunity again to implement this as part of a training program, as an onboard training, or as a secondary training. I think there's also a need to, if you're looking at it from a local perspective, if you're going to work to first responders and police within a community, then I think that would be kind of the leverage point, is connecting it to that shared purpose and that goal of the locale. So I think there is a lot of opportunities, like Peter said, like a major goals of the next phases of research will be to look at that from instead of individuals over time moving past their initial training, but really looking at a specific installation and the networks that are present there.
Yeah, just to kind of swing back to, sort of, again, this model is, I think as we think about this as a model for suicide prevention training for different groups, it's really how do we identify those natural organizational groups and really activate them as engaging these as individual skills, but also as group skills that they can kind of carry with them and influence each other. One of the things I think this model does is airmen who are more struggling, individuals who are struggling more, are learning from those who have some of these skills, but in a way it's a more organic process because it's not just the outside expert who has it. And those relationships endure, the trainer leaves. So it's really, I think that's a powerful part of kind of forming this, trying to strengthen that network. But, it does require certain conditions, like a group that is together, that, will buy in, get the institutional support to participate. But I think it can be done in different environments, but it will, it will take some work to kind of make, identify that right setting and the engagement of the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a question on for retired and disabled vets. I think speaking of what Peter was just saying, I think a lot of it will be to strengthen that network of people leaving service at a time. By linking with this the sponsors program. That is a discussion that that we have started thinking about service members exiting. Really to create a network of support for people as they leave the service, particularly veterans with disabilities, just to kind of graft into an existing network that has had experience interfacing with the VA and the different systems, to actualize a lot of the benefits that are available to veterans. It's a very difficult system to manage as an individual. So, I think, implementing around that network to bolster those interfaces with healthcare, as well as veteran support agencies, I think would be a cornerstone. Peter, I don't know if you saw
a question here about healthcare, and that is our medical center. There's, we're starting to have some discussion with our Department of Psychiatry. There's been some interest in that potentially. I'm very aware of that. How important that could be, and I think certainly welcome anyone else with expertise in that and maybe helping us think through that. It's a time of very, unfortunately, of really growing, demands and really a very stressed workforce. So, but I think, it may be likely these stressors are going to continue on and, even past, say, the most critical kind of crisis point. That may be a hard time to engage a lot of systems, but maybe in the months, year afterward, where there's going to be a lot of sequelae, might be a time to really be thinking about this. Bryan, see this question. You might have had a little more experience with, some of those vet organizations. Hey, Bryan, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, a little noisy around here. Yeah, I think that that would be some of those community touch points that we would be looking to incorporate into that network. Like, I think there would be I think that's the hardest part. Like, I can only speak from my experience and those people that I know well, but leaving active duty in a lot of ways is more challenging than going, and reestablishing a social network is very difficult. Coming out of that thing. So I think utilizing the camaraderie and the shared experiences of places like the Legion and the VFW, and again, with more of an active component of the service member sponsors and things like that to help interface people back into the community as well as the resources that it offers. I think that would be a pretty important aspect of it, aside from the training itself, is to really have all of those key stakeholders and placeholders in place as part of the initiative.
Yeah, I see a question here about suicide rates and maybe since in this year. Certainly something that we're been very attentive, interested in. My understanding, and Jay Crothers, Gar, you may know better. My understanding is I think we are still really don't have a lot of real hard data. That given that there's so often a lag in information about suicide death rates. So I think there's a lot of good reason to be concerned and taking steps that we can. But I think it's going to be a while before we know a lot specifically with data.
That is part of the conversation as well. Just want to be mindful, we are bumping up against the hour. Wanted to see if there were any other questions that folks might have. And we will be, as a reminder, once we get the link, sending this out to folks, just so you'll have that to be able to refer back to. And I think, Bryan and Peter, you mentioned being able to make the slides available as a separate maybe PDF or something. Is that correct?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, probably not the videos. We'll take those out, but the
right.
The other slides would be, yeah.
Super. And just for folks who are on this call, in terms of the next workshop that we're going to be offering, you can do a save the date on December 11th at 12 o'clock. Dr. Drew Anderson from SUNY Albany will be doing a presentation looking at some of the resources available for screening and early intervention with some of the work he's done on EMS. We'll get a flyer out on that shortly, but if you want to mark your calendars, that will be the next one that we have coming up. And if there's nothing else, thank you so much, Bryan and Peter, for this presentation. Sounds really exciting, and a lot of opportunities, I think, down the road, and a lot of expressed interest in terms of how to take this and apply it to other workforces. So looking forward to some of the updates on this work. Everyone, thank you for joining us this morning. Take care, be well, be safe, and we will be in touch with the follow-up information.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks all. Bye.